in Jesus and I believed in God with all my heart. But there's a difference between believing and knowing. You can believe something is true, but when you see it and you feel it and you experience it, there's a big difference. Knowing in your heart. You can believe with your head, but you know in your heart. As my dad had left my life, I was looking for that position, that power in my life. A father represents power. He represents authority. He represents stability and strength to his family, to a wife as well as a child. And because my dad had left, I knew he still loved me, but because he wasn't there to show me that power, the church that I was in, they taught good things, but I didn't see power there. I saw people that believed things, but didn't live them. I saw people that said they believed that Jesus Christ saved them from their sins, but yet they still stumbled and fell every day. And I thought, this can't be real. If this is real, if church is real and God is real, then how come I don't see power there? So at 14 years old, I began looking for a place that I could find real power. And my mom and my brother and I we didn't have very much money. And I had seen some people doing demonstrations of martial arts, and it looked powerful to me. So that's what went through my mind. I thought, if I can get involved with those kind of people, I can learn that type of power. Power to not, have to worry or fear when I'm at school about getting beat up or bullied or pushed around. So I started looking for a martial arts school. And since we didn't have money, I found a school that charged $1 a night. $1 a night. And I thought, that's worth a try. And my mom said, you'll never learn anything there. If they're only charging $1, they can't be teaching anything that's good. And I went there the first night, and I got beat up pretty bad by a little girl that was about this tall. And it's funny when I think back now, because they did kung fu, but they also did full contact Chinese boxing. So we boxed. When we hit, it wasn't with pads and headgear. You had boxing gloves on, and that was it. And I spent 22 years at that school. And what I'm going to share with you tonight is some of the experience of what happened being in that school, and then how the Lord pulled me out of what I'd gotten involved in. There was only 4 belts. You had white, which was a beginner. You had green, which was intermediate. You had brown, and then you had black. When I started there had only been 3 men in over 20 years that made black. Green belt, there had been less than 24 people make green belt in 20 years. So I thought, that's what I want. That's my goal, is I want green. And the only way that you could make green was to be able to beat everybody else that was a white belt. Everybody. The person that could win against every other white belt, they got moved up. The person that could beat all the green belts, they moved to brown. The person that could defeat all the brown belts, they moved up to black. And so what happened was I started a life of conquering others in order to get ahead. And we see that today even in the business world. The only way to get ahead is to step on the people that are around you. And the school that I started in claimed to be a Christian school. They taught Bible verses every night. But on one hand, they were saying one thing, but what they were teaching us was completely opposed to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Anyway, I made green belt in 11 and a half months. Most people, it took 2 years, and it wasn't because I was anything great, but I was that determined. I was so tired of getting beat on and pounded on at school, I wanted my rank really bad. So I went 4 days a week, and I was there usually from 6 o'clock in the evening until 12 o'clock at night. 6 hours a day. And I trained nonstop. And I made green belt in 11 months, and then the Lord sent the first detour in my life to get me out of that. My dad offered me a chance to come live with him and go to college. He said he'd pay for my college. So I moved right outside Chattanooga to a place called Cleveland, Tennessee, and I lived there for 7 years. While I was there, the week that I got there, I said, I've got to find another martial arts school. And I had been told at my first school that there's no other schools in Tennessee or in this part of the country that are as good as ours, because they believed in really fighting. And I found another school that did the same thing, and that was a Bondo school. And Bondo is a Burmese art. They come from Burma, and it's a mixture of Chinese arts and Japanese arts and Okinawan arts. But I was in the Bondo school for about 4 years before I got my first rank. And the first rank that they promoted me to was a brown belt because they knew that I already had experience. I went to a national kickboxing tournament, and I won first place. And when I got back from that, they promoted me to black belt. And that was the first step that I took to really going into the dark side. After you reach black belt, that's when everything changes in the martial arts. And it's funny because normally we think of white as being purity and holiness. The Bible talks about the angels being with white robes and us having white robes, and Yeshua, our Savior, riding on a white horse. But in the martial arts, you start with white, pure and innocent, and you graduate to black, which is dark. And that's the goal for everyone. Anyway, after that tournament, and I'm just going to show some of these, that way if anybody has a question about them, those were certificates I'd gotten. After I won that tournament and I made my black belt, I went back to this place. This was my first martial arts school. This was their symbol. It was called Fire and Water Kung Fu. And they taught all different styles. And I went back to this school, and my instructor remembered me. It had been about 7 years since I'd seen him or talked to him. And I thought, I hope he doesn't know that I made black belt somewhere else, because then he'll put me in here with some of these guys that are brown belts, and I'll get my tail or my hind end whipped. But anyway, without me knowing it, someone had told him that I'd made black belt at another school. So that night that I showed up, he put me with a brown belt, and I did get my hind end whipped or kicked really well. But after that meeting with that other brown belt, I was more motivated because I said, I made black belt in this style, but what they've got at this place is better. So I need to make my rank here. I need to go for a black belt here. It took me 14 years to make black belt in this school. I need to tell a little bit of what it was like. When I say that we did full contact with boxing gloves on. I've seen people with their arms broke, with many concussions. I've seen people with their jaws broke at class. And we fought full contact after green without gloves, empty hand. We were allowed to hit each other in the face. We kicked each other. We didn't touch the knees or the groin. We kicked each other and hit each other as hard as we could to try to prove that we were number one. And we did that for years. And the whole time that I was doing that, I was also hearing Bible verses. And the Lord kept putting up little red flags. And I kept thinking, there's something that's just not right about this. But I did like the power that I was coming in contact with. I started being respected by people at school. There was, we had 250 students at this school. The students there respected me. I had authority over other people as I moved up in rank. So that was what I was looking for. I was looking for something that gave me power. This was my instructor, and this was the night that I made my black belt after 14 years of training under him. And the reason that I show this picture is because as you see some of these pictures I'm going to show you, as I progressed in time, notice the eyes. You can always tell a person by their eyes. You always know what's in someone's heart when you look in their eyes. And you guys know that. If you're dating a girl or if you're married to a girl, you can tell when she really loves you by her eyes. She doesn't have to say a word. But when you look into a martial artist's eyes, you'll see something else. You don't see something that tells you of Jesus Christ. And I really wanted to meet him because I'd seen some of the things he could do and I'd heard a lot about him. This man was a 10th degree in 2 styles of Kung Fu. He was a Grand Master in 2 styles of Kung Fu. It's hard to be a Grand Master in 1 style. That takes usually 40 to 50 years, and even then it's unheard of. He had 2 certificates this big with all sorts of Grand Master seals and signatures all over them. And this man came up to me when my friend introduced me, And he shook my hand, and when he shook my hand, I felt something. I felt something connect us. And he looked at what that first man in Aikido talked about, the energy, the power of the universe in your hand. He began to teach me how to do that. And it got to the point with my students, when I was training, you could take your hands and you could actually form an electrical ball in your hands. And having people come in, even that weren't students, they'd stand there and shut their eyes. I wouldn't tell them what I was going to do. I'd just say, just stand there and close your eyes and tell me what you feel. And I'd shake my arms out like this, and I'd put that energy, that chi, into my hands. And the greater that energy got, the bigger the ball you could form. When you start, you feel it like this, and then it grows. I got my hands like this, and I could take my hands and just go to the side of their head, and it would push them back, even off of their feet. Back about 2 years ago, some of the students that I had would be from here to the wall, and they'd shut their eyes, and I could push them with my hand. Or if they'd reach for me or start walking towards me, I could hold my hand up and stop them. These are things that we see in the movies. I mean, how many of y'all have seen Star Wars? Okay, I watched it. I know I probably shouldn't have, but those are the things that you see in the films. And people say, well, it's make-believe. It's not real. It is real. That's why they put it in the movies, is to make us think about those things and make us long for that kind of power. When it got to the point that I was doing that to people, it didn't matter. Fighting, you don't have to fight anybody. Somebody would, reach for you and you'd block them, and it would hurt them so much from you putting your arm up to block it that they didn't want to fight anymore. We used to do a type of training at the school. It was called pain class. And the first session that you would do a pain class with usually a green belt or a brown belt, you'd have two partners face each other, and my partner over here, he'd hit me on the shoulder, so I'd hit him back on the shoulder. And he'd say harder, and I'd hit him harder, and he'd hit me harder. And we'd go back and forth until one of us said quit. Now, if you get two guys that are pumped full of testosterone, which one of them is going to say stop? I mean, neither one of them do. You keep pushing yourself to go farther. And then we'd go to the face. You'd start smacking the face. So I'd smack him on the face, and he'd smack me on the face. And it would start off, like that. But after a few moments, we would be smacking each other with an open palm as hard as we could. And you build up this quote-unquote energy so you don't feel it. After you got to that point, then we began using boards. And we would start with half-inch oak or hickory boards. And you take one about 4 feet long, and you'd strike each other in the arms, you'd strike each other on the thighs, and you'd strike each other in the stomach. And it's training your mind to control your body. At least that's what they tell us. After you graduated past that, we started using 2x4s and boat oars. And we got to the point where you could shatter a 2x4. Somebody'd swing the 2x4 at you, and you put your arm up, and it would break the 2x4. And it wouldn't even leave a bruise on your body. Now, I'm telling you, after 25 years of doing this, that's impossible physically. Spiritually, when I say spiritually, I mean through the occult, it's very possible. But that's not physically possible unless you have either divine intervention, Yahweh, God is on your side, or unless you have Lucifer on your side. So he began to teach me how to use this power. This is a picture of what they call the chakras, the energy centers in the body. I asked him, after a few years of training under him, I finally got the guts up to ask him about why he had all these pictures of the Hindu gods and the Hindu warriors instead of the Chinese. And he told me, he said, Eric, he said, where did the Chinese get Kung Fu from? I said, the Shaolin Temple. He said, but where did the Shaolin Temple